Well, as I said, it's so good to see everybody, and thank you again for being with us for this 4SA Virtual Roadshow. Welcome. It's really important, we believe, for us to, from time to time, have a roadshow like this because it enables us to talk through, perhaps in more detail and perhaps on a broader basis than we typically would on the different issues. And you will obviously get a very good sense, I think, as we go, of the multiple issues that we're facing when we are talking about the fight for faith and freedom. And that, of course, is what 4SA exists to do. In case this is something that you have not heard before, this is maybe your first time, uh, 4SA, Freedom of Religion South Africa, we are a non-profit legal advocacy organization. What we actually exist to do is to defend and promote our right to religious freedom. That is our right to not only believe what we want to believe within our own homes and in our churches, but also to express that in private, in public, to live out our faith. And of course, very importantly, to pass our faith on to our children. So that is what we have been doing for the past 10 years. This is actually our 10-year celebration this year. And if you want to see some of the things that we have done and where we have, we believe, successfully defended this right to faith and freedom, for all faiths, by the way, we are faith neutral, we are politically neutral, we are doctrinally neutral, but we sincerely believe that this right is absolutely foundational to our democracy. And as I say, we've been defending it for the past 10 years. On our website, you can go and look at a little tab which says victories, and you'll see the multiple areas where we have managed to stave off some of the worst threats to erode this vital freedom, where other nations, interestingly enough, around the world have not been able to do so, and they are literally reaping the consequences of that. So we're very grateful to everybody who supports us, by the way. Thank you so much. We would certainly encourage you, if you are supporting us, please continue to do so. The only opportunity that we have for funding comes from the donations that we're given on a purely voluntary basis. And we're going to be showing a slide toward the end as well, where if you haven't or if you'd like to, then you can get our details and you can donate to us there. That is what keeps us in the game. That is what keeps us in this vital fight for faith and freedom. And as I said, it's a cornerstone of democracy. It's a cornerstone of society, I believe. It is not only our right to believe, but it is conscience, thought, belief, opinion, faith. It is our right to associate, to form associations together, to assemble together like we're doing here, even on this Zoom call. And very importantly, it's our right to pass our faith on to our children. And that is what we exist to do. I want to say to you, we did want to give you an opportunity to put questions that you might have. And we would ask you to please use the chat box, which is at the bottom of your screen. And just please put your questions into the chat box and we'll come to those at the end. And I also want to specifically welcome as well onto this call our head of legal, Mrs. Liesl Pretorius, who's going to be dealing with some of the elements that we're going to be discussing tonight. So without more ado, let me get onto the first and perhaps maybe the most important matter that we're facing, because this is a matter that we have faced before, but it has come round a second time. And that is, you may be aware of this, that the CRL Rights Commission, and let me tell you briefly what the CRL Rights Commission is. It's an institution of state established in Chapter 9 of our Constitution, and it stands for the Cultural, Religious and Linguistic Rights Commission. And it's specifically set up in the Constitution to give a special level of protection, shall we say, to those three vital areas. And you would have thought, because that's what their role is, that that would be exactly what they would do, that they would be vigorously defending the rights to religious freedom for all South Africans. Unfortunately, some now 8 years ago, a chairperson was appointed to the CRL, and she had a very different agenda. Her agenda was to introduce state regulation of religion. State regulation of religion is basically when the state will have the power, assuming the legislation is passed, to license every single religious professional, religious practitioner, and religious organization. And if you do not have a license, then presumably you will not be able to practice or to form religious organizations. And also, interestingly enough, and presumably those licenses won't come for free. It will almost certainly be a expensive exercise. It will pull money out of your pocket as a pastor or out of your religious organization. And that money would then go to government. So it would be a new income opportunity for the government fiscus. And that would be used, obviously, to set up the infrastructure, which would have to be pretty extensive to then regulate whatever is happening in the religious space. We fought this very same thing. 4 years we spent. There were multiple meetings, multiple submissions. We had 5 days in Parliament. And at the end of those 5 days, which was really in response to a report that the CRL had produced, which was called The Commercialization of Religion and the Abuse of People's Belief Systems, that decision was taken by government, by the COGTA Portfolio Committee, which is basically the institution of state that governs this area, that they would not implement the recommendations of the CRL, and they would not pursue legislation to regulate effectively the faith community. And at the time, the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, made a similar statement. He felt that the faith community should be left as they are currently to self-regulate, obviously within the parameters of law, but to be left not effectively ruled by government. It's a chilling trend, by the way, state regulation of religion. I mean, if you want to see some really bad examples, you just have to look no further than China and Russia and the like. But we are also seeing trends in Africa, in the African continent, for state regulation of religion. It exists in Rwanda. We'll get to that later. In Angola. There's initiatives taking place in Namibia, in Uganda, in Kenya, and of course, unfortunately, which is what we're talking about right now, here again in South Africa. What happened is that the same chairperson, Mrs. Toko Mkhwanazi Kaluva, who was pushing this so hard 4 years ago and who we managed to actually fend off, so to speak, she has been reappointed for some reason as the chair of the CRL Rights Commission, and she is right back onto this issue. In her view, she doesn't understand why this fell off the table. Well, you answered that. Parliament said no. But she said now it's back on the table squarely. And she is currently going around speaking to religious leaders, trying to drum up support for a committee to basically put forward a mechanism, what they call a peer review mechanism, so that peer review mechanism, she wants to appoint leaders from the Christian faith, and obviously it would have to be every other faith as well, so that they can be the ones that will actually decide should you or should you not be granted a license. But very significantly and importantly, the CRL, which is why we say that it is unconstitutional, has decided to put itself forward as it says in its report, final arbiter of religion and hold the final decision powers in religious disputes. So effectively, it's state control. No matter how you dress it up, if the state appoints those people to the peer review mechanism and the state has the ultimate say as to whether or not licenses should or should not be given, then you have state control of religion. And state control of religion means you have lost effectively any meaningful right to religious freedom, because the state can then control who can and who cannot speak. And that's one of the most chilling parts of it, because the only institution, apart from political parties, that have the ability to really send a message down to grassroots level, to speak truth to power, so to speak, are the faith communities. And if government can control what faith communities can or cannot do or say or speak, then they can effectively shut out any alternative voice that they don't particularly want to listen to. So again, we believe it's a fundamentally democratic issue. Why is this, or what is the message, or how are they bringing this about? Well, one of the things that they say, and I'll just briefly skim through this, is they say, have you not seen the level of abuse in the faith communities? And in their reports, you might recall, they had the prophet of doom who was spraying insecticide into somebody's face. We had snake eaters and grass eaters and petrol drinkers, and there was obviously Bashiri. There were scandals galore, it seemed. Actually not. They were a tiny fringe minority, but they were hyped up, blown up by the media as if to paint the whole of the religious sector with the same brush, which is to say, look, everybody's out of control. We have to step in and do something. Nothing could have been further from the truth. Secondarily, every single one of the abuses that they listed or mentioned, we did a detailed analysis. There is existing law in place in South Africa to deal with those. And in fact, in many instances, those exact instances have been dealt with by South African law. The Prophet of Doom, so-called, was convicted. And rightly so. Bashiri, I think, is either in jail or he's still in the process of a trial. But the problem wasn't that there are laws. The problem was those laws perhaps weren't being properly enforced, or maybe there was a lack of capacity to do so. But either way, the solution is absolutely and definitively not to then have another raft of legislation and another raft of regulation. Because if you can't enforce the laws that exist, what makes you think that you're going to be able to enforce other laws? Nothing is going to work at all. So I also want to say this. You cannot, by the way, in case you thought that you could, hide behind freedom of religion and commit some form of crime or unlawful act. It has never, ever been a defense to lawlessness. A crime is a crime is a crime. It doesn't matter if you're a pastor or a politician or a postman. You have to obey the rule of law. And the religious community typically, and in the vast majority of cases, is very law-abiding, if not a model of law-abidingness, which of course it should be. Another thing that they say is that why not regulate the religious community? Because accountants are regulated, lawyers are regulated. Well, the answer to that is that yes, because those professions have a body of law and of knowledge that you need to have in order to operate effectively. Faith, by definition, is fluid. You can believe anything you like, by the way, in South Africa, as long as you do not break the law. But even if your belief, as the Constitutional Court has said, is bizarre, irrational, illogical, incapable of scientific proof, it is still protected by our constitutional right. So you cannot have a body of knowledge. But the fact is, in the world today, my research showed me that there are some 40,000 Christian denominations alone, which shows that we do not all agree with each other in terms of how we interpret faith. How can you have one peer review committee that defines that? How could you have, which they probably like, one particular qualification theologically that you would need to have to do that? That is not the role of government at all. And it is certainly a dramatic erosion of religious freedom. Again, we could speak more, but I hope that what I've shared, and I don't want to belabor the point too much, we do have other messages on this on our YouTube channel and what have you, but this is a very serious situation and we need to be ready. There's nothing that we can do at the moment because there is no legislation before Parliament. We are certainly having discussions in the hopes that we're going to be able to push this back from whence it came, because, as I said, the matter has already been extensively and robustly debated and ventilated, and Parliament has already decided on this matter. Why is it around again? It's something of a mystery, but we are pushing it back, and we'll obviously keep you very much up to date with what's happening, because come the day, God forbid, but come the day that there is legislation, that will be the time when we would have the opportunity to make our voices heard through the public participation process.
Good day. This is Nobukosi Zulu, legal advisor at 4SA. Remember to like and share this video and then click on the subscribe button to make sure you never miss our video updates on vital religious freedom issues.